Hi, and welcome to the Soul and Survival podcast with Grant and Louise Bentley. We have run the Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy since 1995. We are both qualified practicing homeopaths, and Grant is also a naturopath. Together, we discovered a link between energy and facial structure based on traditional ideas from homeopathy that have roots going back 200 years. This project is called Homeopathic Facial Analysis, or HFA for short, and has been the cornerstone of clinical diagnosis and training courses since 1999. Between us, we have written and produced 7 HFA books, including Soul and Survival. Soul and Survival is the philosophy of energy influencing matter and how this energy forms individual facial structure, our unconscious drives and fears, our life patterns, and universal time cycles.
Well, hello and welcome to everybody listening, and welcome to you, Louise, and let's get straight to it.
Hi there, Grant. It's nice to speak with you again, like we do every day. Okay, so we thought as a topic we might get into homeopathy a little bit more and the idea of the drug pictures, the personality types. We were raised on it. I think most homeopathic courses contain liberal amounts of drug pictures and personality types. So maybe if you start with explaining what they are, why we were taught them, and why you think they're not the best way to go.
What they are is that they are... right from the beginning, Hahnemann realised that certain remedies or people who needed certain remedies had some emotional or behavioural changes. And that a few of those changes were very characteristic of the person who needs the remedy or found in the proving of the remedy. And so, for example, pulsatilla, which I think we've done once before, has characteristically a lot of yielding and weeping and crying and feeling sorry for themselves. Whereas, say, a remedy like Nux vomica can be really irritable and grumpy and pretty snappish and controlling. So what happened was that we started associating those behavioural changes during stress with the actual personality type that would need that remedy constitutionally. And so particularly when it comes to other homeopathic authors like James Tyler Kent, for example. Now, Kent was really big on writing lots of ideas about understanding what ends up being called drug pictures or personality profiles. These are almost, excuse me, sorry about that. We've actually gone back to back with one of these podcasts, and now we're going to pretend that we're a week apart. But that's why.
that's why you're still having the odd cough.
I haven't got the cough now for 2 weeks.
Well, I hope you don't have it next week.
No, I hope I don't either. Tyler was
Margaret Tyler.
Margaret Tyler was, I think, James Tyler Kent's niece.
Niece, yeah.
And she wrote a book called Drug Pictures based on the ideas of her uncle. And they are essentially that the type of person that needs a remedy as a constitutional is going to be this person A in reference to their behaviour, their emotions, as well as their physical selves. And because that's all encompassed inside the remedy, meaning that, similia similibus curentum, a hand and a glove on the hand, that you should also recognise the drug pictures by more stories about the person who would require them, and sort of associate those stories into the drug pictures so we can better understand them as rather just a collection of facts and figures. So we turn a we turn a remedy into a personality profile, almost like an anecdote to explain it and understand it better.
So as best I remember, and it is an awfully long time ago, probably 30 years ago now, when we were taught this, or I was taught it anyway because I did it after you, but wasn't it that Ken actually wrote to his niece, Margaret Tyler, and kind of told her off that he didn't think it was the right thing to do? And you know that Hahnemann didn't actually do that when it came to choosing his remedies per se.
No.
So there's already, from the very beginning, there's some anomaly there.
Well, it's more than an anomaly. It's a tangent that we've gone on, a bit like in our pretend last week, which was 5 minutes ago, talking about the diet, and how we've gone off on these tangents that, we might have been given this gruel of oats and wheat, just enough to keep us human beasts of burden going. But that's not the same as good food, and to think that they should form the base foundation of the food pyramid's just complete rubbish. It's a tangent that's just wrong.
Same with the drug pictures. So you're saying the drug pictures are the sugar of nutrition.
Oh, they absolutely are. They're the diabetes of homeopathy.
Okay.
It's a negative pathology.
Yeah.
It's to
now,
me.
You got to say why. In your mind, why? I've got my own interpretation as to why I think it's become really popular.
Well, I know why it's become popular, because it's easier to understand.
It's easier to teach. It's more entertaining. But you got to remember when we got the little Mac computer, the little Mac in the college in the 1990s. Like, it was a really big deal, this little Apple Mac, and there was this Mac repertory, which allowed us to go from the great big fat 1,000-page repertory book where you had to thumb through and find things and make notes on charts, and it took you 3 hours to repertorize, or at least an hour. All of a sudden you could press some buttons, choose some rubrics, and it just pulled together a graph of all the remedies that had those symptoms. And I reckon the computer has showed us what we can really do with homeopathy.
But we're talking about 1990s onwards.
Yeah,
and up until then, there were a number of ways that we could try and find the right remedy. We could try and find the right remedy by scaling it down to its keynotes, which is, and I'll get you to explain what keynotes are in a minute, just to save my voice.
No problem.
So keynotes is one thing. The other thing, though, that, in some ways, yes, you're absolutely right that I have heard that story too, that Kent then berated his niece Tyler for, sort of creating this image which isn't true. But I kind of think Kent's having a little bit of a two-way bet there, because he's still pushed it. Like, he was the one that says that sorry. He's the one that says that, one of the reasons you get a well-repertorized remedy that fails to relieve is because we don't understand the nuances of personality differences of one remedy versus another. Now, then if Tyler comes along and bases all of those nuances or into a remedy and trying to create a picture of why one is different from the other in its character, I really think that it's a bit rich to start hanging it on her, to be honest.
Well, I think about Kent's writings. Was it Lesser Writings and Kent's Lectures were the two books, plus obviously the repertory. But when I think they were dull, I believe his students put them together on his behalf. They obviously respected him, and there was a lot to respect. But when you're standing up in front of a class talking about a remedy, you say, for example, let's just take good old sulphur. It's got 30,000 symptoms in it. How do you even begin to start teaching that remedy?
Well, you don't.
The reality is that you've got to kind of...
So you know what you do? You teach people how to repertorize. That's how you
well,
do
that's
it.
what we do now. And that's been a huge shift in our training, is we don't teach you about a remedy as if somehow each remedy is different from the other and you've got to understand the differences. Of course, they're all different, but you don't have to know 30,000 for this and 25,000 for that and 23,000 for that one, and that's just 3 remedies. What human brain can do that? The reality is you can't. So if you can't do something, you don't do a half-baked attempt at trying to do it. And that's what you asked what the keynotes are. Well, basically, so what somebody way back, you could probably trace it back better than me, but somebody back in the 1800s decided they're writing a book. Materia medica has always been popular, and they'll start with A for aconite and end up with thuya down the other end, and sulphur and so forth, and they will pick 10 or 20 or 30 or 100 things that sort of stand out to them, or usually another author, because it's sort of a bit like Chinese whispers. And so, sulphur's worse for heat. And that's absolutely true. As a rubric, it is worse for heat. It's also worse for cold. So now what do? Do you put that into a book and say to all your students, it's worse for heat and it's worse for cold? And then you get to aconite, and that's worse for heat and that's worse for cold. And so's calc carb and so's nux. And the student says, how am I going to differentiate these? The reality is you're not going to do it via actual rubrics, and you're not going to do it via memorising keynotes. You're not going to do it by trying to summarise in some way. You're only going to do it by cross-referencing, which is your repertorising.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Look, the only thing that I can think of when it comes to keynotes, it's sort of an evolution from building a repertory. So when you have, say, someone like Bonninghausen who comes up with, because Bonninghausen is really the first person that does a functioning, workable remedy.
Repertory.
Sorry. I understand that Hahnemann did his own repertory, but it was unworkable. It was just all over the shop. So it required someone with a legal brain.
And he was a lawyer, wasn't he?
Yeah. It required this legal brain rather than a medical brain to get in there and say, almost like a court of law. Well, what is fact and what is hearsay? And what we'll do is that we will place greater emphasis on fact, meaning that we're going to make them worse, say, worse for air on the body. That's a fact in remedy A, and it was proven and reproven. So what we're going to do is we'll give that a value of 5, right? Because remember, Bonninghausen's repertory is 1 to 5,
5 gradings,
not 3 down to 1 like Ken. So the really strong, the facts are 4s and 5s. The hearsays are 3, 2s and 1s.
Yeah.
And I think what you'll find is that just from an evolutionary point of view, that's where the keynotes develop, by trying to take a collection of all the 4s and 5s and stick them all into one sort of base. But
sometimes sometimes a hearsay is a fact. You just don't know it until later on. So you've got a patient comes in and they do have a symptom and it is in sulphur, and you've never heard of it before, but you look it up and you add it to the mix. So from our point of view, we would listen to the patient. We would take 4 to 8, which is pretty nice little general totality of their key presenting symptoms, particularly the symptoms that highlight their relationship with their own environment. Worse for the cold, or worse at 10 o'clock, or worse for eating onions, or worse for going out in the sunlight, or worse for putting their head on the pillow, whatever it might be. You've got in front of you an observant patient, and they're telling you their own interactive relationship with their own symptoms, and you're listening and you're looking for patterns and you're picking them up. You then take those patterns, those symptoms, and you repertorize, and that unique combination that belongs to that patient gives you 7 to 15 remedies on your graph. And now You then need to know what their defence mechanism based on their facial structure. That's what's important about what we do, the Homeopathic Facial Analysis, HFA. And then you cross-match and you say, okay, well, I've got about 15 remedies that have these unique 8 or 6, 7, 8 rubrics, because isn't it amazing how much commonality there is across multiple remedies? And then you cross-match and all of a sudden you've only got between 1 and 3, because every remedy is dominant in this energy in the same way that every person is. That's the miasm. Bring those two together and you don't need personality types. In fact, you'll see remedies work. They're almost counterproductive to what you might have imagined.
Well, remedy
type.
profiles they were originally there to try and get that last little bit of nuanced expertise of why I should choose remedy 1 in my repertorization, or remedy 2 over remedy 1, or remedy 3 over remedy 2. There was meant to be this sort of little nuanced individuality, because we've done this whole individuality thing. But look a little bit like last week when we were talking about nutrition and we said, well, how do you know what foods that you should eat? Well, you should the function of food is to be able to not just fuel the body but to replace the body. Then understand what the body's made of, and there's your answer. So because the body's made up of fats and proteins, then fats and proteins is the type of food that you should be eating. Now, that's really hard to argue against. You can try, but that's really hard logic to actually go against. Now, when you want to know what are the major differences between remedies, well, then you look at the remedies themselves. But what we're doing is that we're looking at remedies by a man-made profile, a story. But the remedies were always telling you what their individuality is because of their course of action. So all psoric remedies are all centrifugal, all pushing from the centre to the circumference. That's their force of action. When you're dealing with a psoric person, that too is their defensive system. So you must match one with the other. So when in our system, we don't need personality profiles. We don't need those sort of keynotes. All we need to do is do a repertorization that tells us these are our remedies of choice, because the symptoms as they are presented by our patient are all then replicated in these 1, 2 or 3 remedies. All right, now it might be 10 or 12, who knows. But then what we do is, like you were saying, we then go to the face, which now tells us that patient's defense mechanism, and all we have to do now is choose one of those well-repertorized remedies that also acts in the same way as that body's defense system is trying to act to harmonize or protect itself.
Yeah, of course. So what that means in real practical terms, which I've loved, and I think a lot of people that have done what we'll call hard homeopathy before they get to HFA, and there's quite a few of us, including us, that it's just so freeing to just sit in front of a patient and not have to agonise over what you think the remedy might be, even after you've done the repertorization, and there's phosphorus and there's nux and there's sulfur and there's mercury, and you know there are differences, and maybe if you go via the keynotes you can differentiate them to some degree, but then your patient doesn't quite have those keynotes, or they've got something else, and then you look it up and all 4 remedies have got it anyway, and you
just... That's right. That's exactly right.
You get so confused.
So which mental keynote are you going to choose?
Well, even mental, even physical.
Which mental keynote are you going to use for nux? You're going to use the irritability, which is a 5 if you're going into Bonninghausen, or a 3 if you go into Kent, or are you going to use the weeping, which is also a 5 and also a 3 in Kent? Now, which one are you deciding is going to be your nux vomica?
You look in the phosphorus and you look in the mercury and you go, oh, it's there too. And when you really dig. It's there. And now you go,
So now what we've done is that we've gone right back to the fireside. We love stories. That's how the human brain learns, right? So what we're doing is we're making homeopathic stories. But that doesn't mean that they're not works of fiction. They're not necessarily fact. And like, for example, what I just said, when you talk about the irritability of Nux, that's only because you've just chosen to take that. It's not because what you could have just as easily taken the weeping and the yielding and put it into Nux, because it comes just as strongly as Nux as the irritability. When you look at T.F. Allen's provings, like, for example, they write about Nat Mur, not Timothy Field Allen, but later on. Other more modern authors talk about Nat Mur, and they talk about this stoicism and this need to sort of go into, if things are emotionally getting to them, they put up this brave image, and then they'll only let themselves go when they're in the comfort and solitude of their room and all that kind of stuff. And that's supposedly based on the provings. But when you go into T.F. Allen's book of the actual proving of this, if I'll do an even figure. I don't think it is this, but an even figure of 10 provers, only one had that stoicism. And only had it once, by the way. And yet we've chosen that one to write now a whole biography around what a Nat Mur person is. But why didn't we choose the one that's far more common and far more proved, which was the fact that they were very irritable and very expressive and all? But we didn't choose to write that. And this is why I don't use them, because we could have they're one-dimensional characters. And if you're going to go down that one-dimensional line, you're going to miss 9/10 of the people that need Nux, 9/10 of the people that need pulsatilla, just to give that one every now and again to a person that just happens to fit this caricature.
And that's subjective anyway. I mean, when you're talking to someone in a clinical setting, most people present their best side, which is socially what we're meant to do. You're not necessarily going to get to know that part of them. They may or may not share that with you down the track. There's this idea that you've got to really get to know your patient, that it might take you 2 years before you even get close to a remedy. It's just not true. You can find a remedy for them within, statistically in our clinic, about 50% get an okay remedy, at least something to start with. 50% on the first remedy. By about 4 remedies, we're around 80%. And then there's a lot of tweaking. There's a lot of case management. You've got to look at things like diet and environment and this, that and the other. But nonetheless, you don't need to worry about this personality thing. You don't even have to worry about keynotes. You just need to know how to repertorize.
Well, Hahnemann did say that personality changes amongst a sick person were important
changes.
Symptom. But that's right. We've mistaken this advice, and we've gone off on a food pyramid tangent that is just plain wrong. And just like the food pyramid itself, trying to get this out of the heads of homeopaths that have built whole reputations now. They've become teachers. They've written books that are all based on this one foundation. And trying to change that foundation it's just impossible.
It is tricky. Unlearning is much harder than learning. It's really quite hard to clear your mind. And even now, we'll fall for it. We haven't done it for 25 years, really. But, you'll think, that person's a bit this way or that way, and you fall back on a keynote. It's very seductive. Yeah. It really is. The storytelling, it's great for teachers. I remember hearing about a teacher somewhere in Europe who would come to class dressed as the character of the remedy dressed up and acted out like a personality. I mean, I'm sure it was a lot of fun. Everybody probably had a lot of fun, but in the end, remedies are like 1,000 times more than that. They have so much more potential. They're not one-dimensional things. They're as interesting and diverse as any human being can be. And when you as a homeopath see a patient, and, I know you, Grant, and I've got the same. We've got some patients going back more than a decade. I think I've got a couple that are almost 20 years in, and I feel like I know a lot about them, but they'll still say something. I think, I didn't know that about you. Because why should you, when you're only catching up with them every 3 to 6 months for 30 minutes, and they're talking about what's uppermost in their mind for that particular consultation, you're going to miss all the nuances of them. So
you can't possibly think that as a practitioner, you're going to be able to write this incredibly nuanced, and they're all, when it's all sorts of remedies. Not even, if we were just stopping at tried and true ones by like nat myrrh or sulphur or whatever, where there's just mountains of knowledge, that'd be one thing. I still think it's wrong, but that'd be one thing. But we're getting these comprehensive biographies of supposedly the personality types that need sea urchin and remedies you don't even use. How the hell could you have accumulated all of this knowledge? It's not. So first of all, one, it's bollocks. It's just it
most likely.
Not most
even if
likely,
only 1% of it's true, it's not enough for good clinical practice. That's the reality.
And where do you stop? Like we know, for example, now what happens is you're starting to get some remedies prescriptions that are being based on these anthropomorphic projections, like, I really like dogs, so therefore they get, I gave them akin and it was amazing. It's always amazing.
Yeah.
And yet I get people that have gone to these practitioners and nothing helped, and just good old lycopodium pulls them out of it.
Yeah.
And I gave them lycopodium because they gave me 4 or 5 symptoms,
and it repertorized.
And I repertorized it,
and their facial structure was in the yellow group.
Their facial structure says they're yellow, and lycopodium has that centrifugal protective action. So I just match one with the other, and there we go.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating because, in a way, I believe the work you've done, and I'm going to still always attribute the majority to you, because I think I ask okay questions, but you sure as eggs do the research and come up with the answers, and you do the testing. The clinical testing you've done has been extraordinary, and you've learned a lot about how to make homeopathy quite easy, very effective, and beyond just first aid and acute, which can be pretty much straightforward for most practitioners, first aid and acute. These are not particularly difficult areas to cover, but the chronic case, which really is 98% of everything that comes in your clinic is chronic. I mean, chronic illness is the flagship of our times. There's no doubt about that. Like, between the food and the sedentary lifestyle and the screens and all the other stresses and the repetitive kind of factory style work that so many people get locked into, like, we got a lot of issues to deal with, and chronic disease is a strong outcome. And so a homeopath really needs to be good at chronic disease. And these personality pictures, these keynotes, they are at best 5%. I just think they're better to never learn it all. Just don't learn them.
No, don't
don't learn them. Don't go there. Warning.
No, don't learn them. And one of the problems is that, for patients of ours, is they don't understand that we think that kind of prescribing is, well, it's beginner's stuff, right? And it's elementary at best.
But it's not even good for beginners. I'm really sad that it's there at all. I mean, if I was to wave a magic wand, I would just get rid of the lot. I mean, we culled an enormous amount of books. We had this huge library of nearly 1,000 homeopathic books, and it was like, we give them away. And we're like, well, who are we going to give them to? We don't want people learning like this. This isn't the right way to learn. This is not a good way to learn homeopathy. We got rid of the majority of them. They went to the tip, because that's how little we think of personality types and keynotes, but a good repertory program with solid provings where that information is being properly allocated, that repertory program is gold. You need a repertory program. Don't even bother with books. Books are like 1,000 times too slow. Get a good repertory program. Learn the face. Learn the defense mechanism / miasm colour group of the patient. You put those two together and you are in the ballpark for a great remedy.
The other thing too, though, is that one of the reasons that I think that this has become a major teaching tool now is that this is how human beings this is how we memorise from stories. So it fits the way that we think. Like if I sit down there, you know that we were both at a seminar one time where someone said that, there's a perversity to syphilinum and, I knocked on the door of a patient and they opened it in their underpants and that was my first introduction to syphilinum as a remedy. And I just thought, give me a break. and
you don't like those kind of stories. No. Not at all.
But, if I sit down there and go, but syphilinum's better for cold, it's better for higher altitudes, worse at night, which one are you going to remember? If I say, tell me one thing that you remember about syphilinum, the underpants or the other
Of course you're going to remember the underpants story. But here's the crazy thing. How often does a patient come into your clinic, or you do all your patients on, video calls? They're not going to sit there in their underpants. The odd one, you might get one, but it's got nothing to do with the remedy. No. Nothing at all. It's so facile. It's so surface. It might be interesting. You might remember it more. Here's something you probably don't want to say out loud, but good, solid homeopathy is very scientific, and it can be a little rote once you get going, but what's not rote about it are the outcomes. The outcomes are extraordinary. It's very uplifting.
I'm not going to be upset by that. And in fact, that's where I was going to go with the second point, was one that this is how a human brain will listen to stories before it will listen to individual points of fact. It'll just remember the story. Don't remember the underpants, please. It's completely wrong. But the other thing is...
You've just ruined syphilinum for everybody now.
Yeah. I've given syphilinum to many people who are absolutely...
Fully clothed.
Fully clothed, yes. I demand that patients be fully clothed. But also, too, are completely neurotypical. Remedies is something you need to get yourself back on track. Yeah. They're not something that you are.
They're like a packet of information,
point two, while I remember it, but point two is that I think that people are being taught nuances and they're being taught intuition before they're being taught facts.
Yeah.
Like you've got to... I know 8/8 are 64... right off the top of my head, and I'm terrible at maths.
You are terrible at maths.
But I know 8/8 are 64 right off the top of my head because we had a blackboard and a teacher that had a stick and they just went down and we repeated.
Yeah.
8/8 are 64. All this sort of the times table. I can't name you anything that's 13 times anything except maybe 13 times 1.
Or 10.
Yeah, but even then I had to think. But 12 12's 144. No, it's straight off my head.
Yeah.
It's that rote learning of facts is being replaced by nuances and intuition.
Yeah.
And but here's the truth.
There's no experience.
Students, they don't know enough to apply nuance and intuition. Gut intuition. So, and I use it occasionally, but very occasionally. But that intuition is based on an actual calendar full of patients, day in, week in, week out, month in, month out for 30-something years. And I base sometimes I get intuition and I think, actually, I might have just go at this a different way. But it's all completely based on all of the experience that I draw on. You can't get somebody who's a year one, who hasn't had 8 8s of 64 drilled into them over and over and over again and expect that they can apply intuition. But that's exactly what we're doing.
It's
wrong, it's wrong, and it's wrong.
Yep.
You need to have a factual base in any profession or any trade. You need to just drill the facts home, and only from there, from that point and after a lot of experience, can you then branch out. But they're being taught to branch out straight away.
No, it's really wrong. I mean, it's so simple in the end. It's, what is a symptom? How do you define one symptom over another? What's an important symptom? What isn't an important symptom? What is a rubric? How do you repertorize? How do you work out the defense mechanism or miasm of the patient? How do you bring the two together? It's you've got to get back to the basics. You've got to do them properly. And once you do them properly, you can then give a remedy that's got a pretty high chance of doing something. And then if it doesn't, you know how to assess that. You know where to restart. Case management's huge too. We've been talking about the basics, but the case management is huge. Once you get a good remedy,
selection, and here's just the nail in the coffin. If you don't feel as if the personality profiles or drug pictures should be dead and buried, and really you should be running from the hills if somebody wants to go down that pathway, because honestly, it's a futile way of doing things.
It's a real shame.
It is a real shame, and it's led homeopathy onto a tangent that has been, again, I'm going to just sort of make an analogy to the food pyramid. The food pyramid has been absolutely disastrous. You only have, if you look at a 1970s or 1980s music clip or a 1970s music, we're about a third of the size then as what we are now. And yet, people have dutifully followed the food pyramid by cutting down on their meats and cutting down on their oils, and yet chronic disease has absolutely skyrocketed. And then diabetes and cancer, you got to be kidding. That is out of control. So in the end, can you really come up with a foundation that everybody follows and yet is wrong? Yes, you can. And homeopathy has done exactly that. These personality profiles are not 100% wrong, because there's 1 in 100 that will fit that. But the other 99 that really needed that as a remedy that you've completely overlooked, that's a real big problem. Because if the majority of people aren't getting success from the remedies, then they just stop going. They vote with their feet.
As they should.
And we end up in a terrible position.
As they should. Well, we are nearly 25 years into this century. We are coming up to the halfway point of the brown miasm that we are living in. It's overlaying the whole planet for 150 years. Won't it be interesting if it goes from everything being upside down to everything being the right way up? Wouldn't that be a nice inverse flip?
Well, it'd be a fantastic inverse flip, and I really hope to see it.
Well, we'll be around for a few years, so we might see it.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath, put it that way.
No, don't hold your
breath. But where
breath.
this still comes back to bite us, of course, is that we have a lot of patients, a lot of mums that will look up, as is their right to do, the remedy that I prescribe.
Yeah.
But of course, if you're getting a lot of this personality profile, I mean, how many times do we get, because I forget because I don't use it, I don't look at the personality profile. So when a mum sort of turns around and goes, "Oh, you absolutely nailed that. That was really good. I went and looked up the well, that's sheer blind bloody luck because I didn't look it up."
Yeah, of course not.
But the other one is a more negative one.
That's more
where
common.
You go, "Is this what you think of my kid? My kid doesn't do this and my kid doesn't do that." And yet, but that's not why I chose it.
No.
I chose it because of facts. 1, 2, 3, 4, meet symptom 1, 2, 3, 4, and their face and remedy match.
Yeah.
Right? That's all it is.
If you want to do, I've given this to students before, a pretty good exercise with a repertory program on a mind profile for a remedy. Pick any remedy, doesn't matter which. Go to the mind section and just pull out all the rubrics for that remedy for the mind, and then read them all. There'll be at least 200, if not 500 or 600 for each remedy, and then start trying to cluster them into opposites. It's, in the end, it's an extraordinary exercise because it's kind of like it could be anything. It's an incredible exercise.
It's fantastic to watch if you're. It'd be fantastic to watch if you're an observer watching a TV series. But as far as being clinically useful, these characters would end up so multifaceted and so nuanced that you've got nothing.
Yeah.
You know, like you can really dumb characters down. And one good thing about having the flu over the weekend was that we caught up on a bit of TV, or I did.
Yeah.
And I watched 2 shows. One was appalling. Apples Never Fall or something it was called.
Great book, terrible series.
Leanne Moriarty, as a writer,
it's fantastic.
Is unbelievably good.
Yeah.
She can just capture people in their frailties, their strengths, their essences. She is absolutely wonderful.
She does good personality types, actually.
Yeah, no.
For a novel, she's brilliant.
She'd be great to talk to, wouldn't she? Because so observant of human behaviour.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
But the series,
the show was
The
appalling.
series was rubbish. I didn't even finish. It was rubbish.
So diluted and one-dimensional.
But then you compare that to the other one that I watched, which is called The Bear.
Yeah.
And the characters are so nuanced, and you can see repeating patterns where the main character, and I forget his name now,
Carmy.
Carm, yeah, C-A-R-M, Carmichael, I suppose.
Carmy, isn't it? Carmy?
Anyway, the characters are so well acted, and the characters
well written
are so well written. And but what's interesting is that from a homeopathic point of view is you see patterns repeating. So, and you do definitely see repeating patterns in people's life stories. So with Calm, for example, you see him come from this incredibly chaotic family to feeling at home in a cooking environment where the pressure's on and it's just chaos all over again. And his survival instinct feels comfortable in that environment, even though it's costing his personal happiness. And that could maybe be a topic for another day, because that's what the survival instinct does. It keeps you into a routine, but there's no guarantee that routine is going to be a happy routine for you, right? And this is why a lot of anxious kids with pandas, for example, also have OCD behaviours. The world is real, and it's also too, I would dare say, the basis of addiction. It's trying to take a world that is, 100 miles wide and narrowing it down to an inch wide, because that inch is at least understandable. All I need to do is just repeat the same routine, get the same drink, get the same shot, get the same whatever. Life becomes understandable because it's just too big out there.
But you did make a bit of a joke after watching those 2 shows, and you said they're so opposite. You said, what did you say? It's the apple and the pear. The apple and the bear. I
shouldn't compare apples and bears.
Apples and bears.
Yeah.
But what, in a nutshell, what what would you say the difference between the two was?
Well, the difference is that if you're going to put it into remedies, you have to put them into apples never fall characters, otherwise you won't understand them. They're too complicated.
But that wasn't real.
But it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not real.
Right?
It's too one-dimensional.
It's so watered down and so dumbed down to think that every single person needing belladonna is going to come into your clinic and answer questions in the same tone or have the same favourite colour or do it. I mean, honestly, do I really have to go through what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
But what's wrong with that is the practitioners don't see what's wrong with that. That's what's wrong with it, that you don't see what's wrong with that. But you can also have the complexity of the bear. But when you're bringing that back into clinical terms, you're seeing them as a patient, but it doesn't help you define the remedy because it's their complexity, their nuances, their stresses, their reactions are just so multifaceted that how do I narrow this down? Well, you don't. So what I would do in a situation like that, where you've got this perhaps a patient coming in with an incredible neurodiversity and almost or a pathology, a behavioural pathology, where they're just here, there and everywhere, I would go back to Hahnemann. And that is if the mentals are just too all over the place, find a physical general that can anchor you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'd do.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Find what is real. When everything is chopping and changing and alternating and moods are here, there and everywhere, which one are you going to choose? Well, don't choose any of them. Tell me about your arthritis and what makes that worse. Well, I'm here for my depression. Don't worry about it. Just humour me. We're going to try and find something that is anchoring and something that is real. Because remember, going back to Bonninghausen, that one general won't represent itself in one symptom only. That's why it's a general. Try and find that general, like a worse for or a better for or whatever, and it'll be the whole thing. The whole case will be better for it or worse for it. So find that anchor. Don't get lost in the mists of the mind. And certainly do not try and analyze people and put them into simplistic boxes. It makes a fool out of the system, and it makes a fool out of the practitioner that doesn't. That's what I think.
Well, I reckon it's a really good place to end on. Thanks for that. That's a good reminder about...
So seeing as though we now no longer have a friend in the world,
don't be silly. The truth is the truth, and clinical efficacy is clinical efficacy, and all we're trying to say is, listen, there is a more simple, a more thorough, a more efficient way. Don't get fluffed up in your head with a whole lot of lightweight rubbish. If you want to do it properly.
Well, if you're a PANDAS parent and you're listening to this, one of the very first things that I say to PANDAS parents when they say, what is happening here and what does this mean and whatever, I say to them, look, if you're going to try and rationalise the irrational, you're going to get completely lost. Right? Don't even try to understand what it means. Don't give it a rational base and then try to explain it. Just accept the symptoms for what they are and that it is a state of disorder. I don't need to know why. I don't need to know the symbolism of it. There probably won't even be any. Just accept it for what it is as a symptom. And I guess I was going to go somewhere with that. It's
your purpose is to fix it.
If you get caught in the labyrinth of the mind, you're going to get lost.
Yeah. Your purpose is to fix the case, to help the case, and as a practitioner, your duty is to simplify it, keep it straightforward to get good results. That's what you're trying to achieve, and it's not up to you to feel entertained by the case, to be entertained by the process of learning about homeopathy. It is up to you to use it in a practical way where it has the greatest benefit for the most people. That's what we're here for.
And that's just generals, face, miasm, match.
Yeah,
that's it.
Pretty much.
Dull.
And then it can be, it's funny, it is a little dull at times, but at the same time, what's not dull about it is the outcomes and the joy and the positive vibes, and that's what hopefully you're there as a healer for.
Look, I tried all of those. You know.
Yeah.
You know me very, very well, and you know that I'm a pretty experimental person. And I tried all of these methods, and I'm telling you, they don't work.
No,
they just don't.
They're not. They work a small percentage of the time. That's enough to keep them going, but it's not enough.
You can't run a successful clinic off a small percentage.
No, it's not fair. It's not reasonable. It's just not reasonable.
Anyway.
All right, on that note, we've got lots of things we'll be talking about in future episodes. And again, thank you to some of the nice feedback we've been getting. That's been really good, and we hope that you enjoy these discussions, and we really hope that you get interested in learning about HFA, because you can turn your family around, you can turn your clinic around, and it's just really well worthwhile, and we've tried to deliver it in the shortest, most simple and cost-effective way we can.
And as any of my patients will be able to testify, is that I try and answer questions as complex, as thoroughly as what I can, in really as simple terms as possible. And the reason that I do that is because patients, parents particularly, if we're dealing with kids, they need to learn some basics. So they need to learn when to be afraid, when to contact me, why I'm doing things. I always explain why I'm repeating this remedy or doing it in this fashion, why I'm going up a potency, why I'm perhaps just going up in a frequency, why I'm changing. All of these things, this knowledge means that it contextualizes the problem, and particularly when it's a behavioral problem, you can get so lost in the labyrinth of the emotion of what's going on. But if you can learn a bit yourself as the parent, you can begin to understand why the child is behaving, what are the triggers, what to expect, and why not to get so overwhelmed or fearful or frustrated or whatever it might be. It's really important knowledge for you. Louise said earlier, we are in our 60s. We're not going to be doing this in our 80s, I can assure you. So we need to get people trained as best as they possibly can be in this short period of time. So I would strongly advise you, as a parent or as a sufferer, that you really listen to these podcasts, become as acquainted as possible. Read the books that we've got. They're all in everyday language. We try to keep jargon out of it. And the courses that we offer are for exactly that. Even if you don't want to practice, just understand, just to be able to understand it and master what's going on for your own sense of security is really, really important. So there's a lot of things there on offer. I would strongly suggest that people in this position take advantage of that.
Sounds like a really good place to end.
Okay. See ya. We'll see you in a real week's time without the cough, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Grant.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Soul and Survival. If you are interested in more information, books, courses, consultations, learning more about facial analysis or life themes, please visit our college site, Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, vcch.org.